Kia ora and welcome to Māori Minds, where I explore Māori philosophy and mental health and find new ways of applying traditional knowledge. Ko Kiri Prentice taku ingoa, no rua toki me te teko o kutīpuna, ke te noho au ki tāmaki makaurau, he tākute he ngaro ahau. Kia tīmata. In order to appreciate te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, and its history, significance and relevance to this country's past, present and future, and all the tensions associated with it, it is helpful to start with the largely overlooked and misunderstood historical background of pre-colonial Māori society. For Māori, a central tenet of the nature of reality and existence is whanaungatanga, relationships, something I refer to as the Ontology of Whanaungatanga. This is why Māori introductions, the pepeha, acknowledge ties to an ancestral maunga, mountain, awa, river, iwi, tribe, hapū, subtribe, and so on. This is why Māori see the world in terms of kinship ties, whakapapa, including their relationship with nature, te taiao. This is why in te reo Māori the word Whenua means both the land and placenta, and hapū means subtribe and pregnant. Therefore, Māori philosophy and thinking are not anthropocentric. The universe doesn't revolve around humans, nor is it mechanistic. Traditionally, Māori were more inclined to broader ecological perspectives and systems thinking. For example, when considering the potential impact of decisions affecting sustainable sources of food, essential relationships with neighbouring hapū, and the well-being of the people. If relationships are the essential condition of existence, then you can understand why whakawhanaunga, establishing relationships, and whanaungatanga, maintaining relationships, are critical to Māori culture. The word Māori, with a lowercase m, is an adjective meaning ordinary, so Māori people means ordinary people. Māori with an uppercase M is a noun coined by Pākehā to describe the indigenous people of Aotearoa. But the indigenous people refer to themselves as tangata whenua, land people or people of the land. The main social groups in Māori society are whānau, extended family, hapū, subtribes comprised of related whānau, and iwi, tribes containing related hapū. There are many words for meetings in te reo Māori, the Māori language. Hui, runanga, which is a higher level meeting where hapū or iwi come together to discuss matters of common concern, and whakamininga. But whakamininga is a high level kind of meeting, almost at the spiritual level. It refers to the coming together of the divine will with the human will. He whakamininga o ngā hapū was a confederation of hapū created to claim independence of Aotearoa, with he whakapūtanga o ngā Rangatiratanga o New Tiriti, the Declaration of Independence of the United Tribes of New Zealand, in 1835. Historically, hapū were the central social, economic and political unit. Iwi only came to prominence in the 1850s after te Tiriti o Waitangi. Hapū were autonomous, self-governing communities of closely related whānau. They were small, independent nations. Hapū identity was typically based on an eponymous ancestor whose name was taken by the hapū. The famous constitutional lawyer Moana Jackson explained the importance of hapū well. Hapū is also the word which means to be pregnant or to be swelling with life. And so it was at the hapū level that the important life and death decisions were made. Decisions to go to war, to make peace, to treat. Hapū would treat with each other. Some refer to this as mahi tūhono. Hapū had kinship ties. They forged alliances through intermarriage, And sometimes hapū and iwi would enter into enduring peace accords sealed with a political marriage, something called tatou pounamu, greenstone door. Tangata whenua were land people, not landowners. They didn't have an equivalent concept to individual property ownership. That is not to say that there weren't territorial disputes between hapū and iwi. There were. But for Māori, humanity descends from Papatuanuku, Earth Mother, Primal Mother, from whom we gained our physical aspect, our ira tangata, and the ira atua, the non-physical or spiritual aspect, came from Tāne Mahuta, the atua of the forest. While many Māori trace their origins from their ancestral waka, canoes, that migrated from Hawaii, our spiritual homeland, others speak of being born of this land, like the hapū the hapū of the earth or soil, and ngā Pōtiki, whose eponymous ancestor, Pōtiki Tike Tike, was born of the union of Te Maunga, the mountain, and Hene Pūkohurangi, the mistmaid. The whenua has its own mana and tapu, authority and sanctity. It exists as an entity, due respect and protection. The whenua birthed us. The whenua sustains us. The relationship with the whenua is one of whakapapa, genealogy. So the people have a duty as kaitiaki, guardians or stewards, to the whenua. Occupation of the land doesn't necessarily mean people have authority over the land, as is the case with whenua tuku or tuku whenua, when land is gifted to another people for their settlement, but the mana or authority over the land remains with the original people. The authority to make decisions regarding the whenua is a matter of mana whenua. The key responsibility of a rangatira, a leader, chief or chieftainess, was to ensure the well-being and the future of their hapū. This entailed protecting traditions, custom, tikanga and kawa, land, the environment and natural resources. It involved decisions on political and military matters and social practices. A rangatira must protect the mana, the power, authority and prestige of the hapū, and respond to offences committed against them, and perhaps seek utu, responses that restore dynamic balance and harmony, which could include war. A rangatira secured marriages and alliances by demonstrating manaakitanga, that hospitality, or giving a koha, a gift, and strengthening whanaungatanga, relationships. The work of whanaungatanga between hapū was unceasing. This is why Māori were able to rapidly mobilise so many rangatira to sign he whakapūtanga and te tiriti. They didn't have phones, but they had excellent human communication networks. Rangatira understood the importance of whanaungatanga, enduring relationships that were mutually beneficial, and the necessity of reciprocity. A rangatira was mandated to make decisions on behalf of the hapū. They tended to be the firstborn of noble lineage connected to the local whenua with an aptitude for leadership. A rangatira has certain pūmanawa, innate talents, described in an old whakatauki, saying, E waru ngā pūmanawa, the 8 talents of man. Those pūmanawa are 1. Industry, in cultivating or obtaining food. 2. The power to manage and mediate, to allay problems or troubles. 3. Bravery and courage in war. 4. Generalship, a good leader of people in war. 5. Knowledge of the arts and carving, etc. 6. Generosity and kindness. 7. The knowledge of house, fort and canoe building. And 8. Knowledge of tribal boundaries. The authority of rangatira was bestowed by their people, and that authority could also be withdrawn if they failed in their duties and did not consider the best interests of the hapū. However, Rangatiratanga, leadership, was not the exclusive domain of the elite. The mischievous rule-breaking rangatira remains a famous heroic rangatira archetype embodied by many Māori leaders like Maui, Kahungunu, Tamatekapua and more. Active inquisitive children with such a nature were not punished as defiant and disobedient, but rather recognised as intelligent with leadership potential. They are affectionately described as haututu. Their development was guided with more flexible approaches. A rangatira has mana, authority, prestige, power, influence, status, and spiritual power. There are multiple English translations of Rangatiratanga: chieftainship, the right to exercise authority, ownership, kingdom, realm, sovereignty, self-determination, self-management, and independence. Tino Rangatiratanga is routinely translated to absolute sovereignty, the highest chieftainship or self-determination. The Waitangi Tribunal has extensively discussed the scope of Tino Rangatiratanga, while the courts have largely avoided defining Tino Rangatiratanga. The precise translation of sovereignty is one of the biggest points of contention with Te Tiriti or Waitangi. One must understand mana to understand authority and what might approximate the Western concept of sovereignty in traditional Māori society. Mana has no single definition. It has many different characteristics. It is closely related to the concepts of tapu and mauri, and there are many different types of mana. Tapu is that which is restricted, set apart, sacred, sanctified or consecrated, thereby creating the conditions necessary for empowerment with mana. A tohunga, a priestly expert, was set apart from others to maintain their tapu and mana. An urupa, a cemetery, is set apart from the living as a place for the dead. A rangatira is set apart from others by their intentions, role, responsibilities and work. The complementary opposite of tapu is noa, the unrestricted, neutral or mundane. People tend to think of Maori as a vital essence or life force. That sounds a lot like the Force on Star Wars. A more helpful explanation of Maori is that it is a principle of cohesion. Maori is what gives a forest ecology its vitality. It's what maintains social cohesion. It is that thing that sustains the life and well-being of an individual because of its cohesive nature, and it resists fragmentation of the self, one's identity or psyche. Maori is protected by mana and is therefore strongly associated with tapu. Maori isn't an animating force. It is not an example of Māori animism or vitalism. That's a taurangi rereke, an unlike term, a false equivalence. Individuals have their own mana, tapu and mauri. Acts of manaakitanga or hospitality are intended to enhance the mana of another, and people who are particularly skillful at manaakitanga are seen to have greater mana themselves. The right of a person, a rangatira, by consensus to represent the interests of the people regarding the land is called mana whenua. A hapū holds mana whenua over their area of land. A rangatira, on behalf of the hapū, with mana whenua, can speak about how the land is used, accessed, and so on. Mana whenua relates to local economic power. Mana tangata is like political power, where a person is appointed as a representative leader of a group of people, either whānau, hapū, iwi, or even waka. They provide the consensus opinion of the people. Mana atua is to be empowered or endowed with a particular gift through an atua, god or deity. For instance, some people were endowed with the aptitude for superior military tactics. Mana motuhake is very important to the iwi of Ngai Tūhoe. It is similar to tino Rangatiratanga. Both terms have been translated to self-determination, sovereignty and self-government. For Ngai Tūhoe, mana motuhake has been likened to a charter of rights, like the self-evident truths in the American Declaration of Independence. Mana motuhake has connotations of unique power and authority, freedom, liberty, nationhood, self-determination and independence. There were no kings, queens or monarchy in the pre-colonial Māori society. The most suitable Māori concepts to explain such absolute sovereignty are mana motuhake, tino Rangatiratanga and mana. This is vital to note when considering He Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence of the United Tribes of New Zealand of 1835, and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Te Reo Māori text, and the Treaty of Waitangi English text of 1840. The famous Enlightenment thinker John Locke wrote of the right of revolution in his 1689 essay, Two Treaties of Government. The right of people to instigate a revolution against the government when it acted contrary to the interests of its citizens. For Māori, people have always had the right to rebel, to protest, and to express their dissatisfaction with the performance of their rangatira. This could be expressed in a haka, or a manawa wera, which means a seared heart. This refers to an angry, defiant chant that can relate to political or personal matters. Utu is widely misunderstood and commonly conflated with revenge. More nuanced descriptions of utu can be found in Waitangi Tribunal reports. Utu relates to reciprocity. It concerns the maintenance of harmony and balance and of mana. Utu can be the penalties exacted on individuals or collectives for offences that threaten the tapu and mana of an individual, whānau, hapū, and so on. Utu can be a reciprocal and competing relationship based not just on warfare or slights, but also on competitive hospitality and mutual economic relationships. Where the narrowest definition of utu is reciprocal actions, more broadly speaking, utu relates to the responses that restore balance and dynamic harmony. If utu is an action, then the underlying metaphysical principle or spirit of that action is hau. Hau has largely been forgotten and is more misunderstood than utu. It once was internationally famous thanks to the French sociologist Marcel Mauss and his essay The Gift concerning gift economies. Mauss was inspired by the words of Tamati Ranapiri, recorded by ethnographer Elsden Best. However, more accurate explanations of hau can be found in the work of the Reverend Māori Marsden and Manuka Henare. The notion of hau brings together ecology, economy, sociology and health. At its essence, it means reciprocity. At a metaphysical level, hau is the dynamic and synergistic nature of the relationships of the ontology of Whanaungatanga. Hau is the symbiotic relationships from which ecosystems emerge, like the union of fungi and algae, that is lichen, which generates the soil substrate needed for more complex life in a biosphere. This means that te taiao, nature, cannot be relegated to a mere resource to be exploited by humans. Such thinking would inevitably result in a disturbance in the hau, of the ecosystem affected. Hau is what completes all things in the realms of the land, the sky, the sun, the moon and the stars. Hau is why when a gift is given, it must be reciprocated in some way. Hauora refers to the dynamic reciprocal relationships necessary for life and well-being, for health. The traditional Māori economy and society was about as far away from capitalism as you can imagine. In a hau economy, the currency circulated or the medium of exchange is mana. Mana is about authority, being effectual, it's about agency and most importantly empowerment. Why circulate mana? Because there is no better way to advance the interests of people than to enable their empowerment, which strengthens and relies on whanaungatanga. To ensure a better future, the goal is to have a surplus of empowerment, mana, and to pay mana forward. This requires work to maintain relationships that are enduring, mutually beneficial, and dynamic enough to respond to change, which is inevitable. This is why manaakitanga, hospitality, whanaungatanga, and the giving of taonga, treasures, and koha, gifts, are so integral to Māori society. Hau is not a demon or spirit that bites back when a gift is not reciprocated, and it is not mere social pressure to conform to social obligations. To be an effective kaitiaki, guardian of the whenua or some other system like the health system, one must understand the hau of the system they care for. They must be able to identify disturbances in the hau and take action to restore it to dynamic harmony. That could be through utu or hohaurongo, for instance, the latter being peacemaking or restorative actions. Kaitiaki must act in accordance with tikanga, protocols based on Mātauranga Māori, to protect the hau and the mauri, tapu and mana of those entities of the system they care for. That could be the whenua, land, the ngahere, forest, a hapū or an individual. The role of a rangatira includes being an effective kaitiaki, but they cannot do that alone. They rely on the people to keep them fully informed, to uphold tikanga and to support the actions recommended by the rangatira, like utu. Rangatira are empowered by their people, they are answerable to them, and they are dependent on them. Mātauranga Māori is traditional knowledges and ways of knowing of the Māori people. Much like how the idea of individual property ownership was foreign to pre-colonial Māori, so too was the idea of individual intellectual property. Mātauranga was collectively created, interpreted, critiqued, expressed, shared and retained. The quintessential method of collectively handling mātauranga was to wānanga. The verb wānanga means to meet, discuss, deliberate, debate and consider. Although Māori didn't have a written language, they didn't lack for a means of expressively sharing mātauranga. They used metaphor, narrative, prose, song, dance, carving and weaving commonly. They also had very impressive memories. Implicit or practical knowledge, like how to make a hinaki, an eel trap, was combined with explicit knowledge, like the whakapapa genealogy of the eel and its place in an ecosystem. This was all often conveyed in pūrākau, stories. Understandably, Māori had a different pedagogy, a different method or practice of teaching from Europeans, but they did have schools of higher learning of a sort, like universities. The wharepora, the house of weaving, presided over by the atua hine te iwiwa, also known as hina, the female personification of the moon, and atua of fertility, weaving, whakapapa and deeper knowledge. whare maire, where select initiates learned of the law of te kete tuatea, one of the 3 baskets of knowledge, with restricted knowledge pertaining to karakia, prayer and incantations, mākutu, malignant sorcery, and that which can do harm. Hine nui te pō, the origin of death, presided over this school, along with other lesser atua, like Tunui o te ika, represented by a flying star. Young and old took recreation in the whare mātoro, the house of social intercourse, where pūrākau were recited to the common people by elders. The whare built outside of the pā was the whare tātai. Tātai means to recite genealogies. The study of the heavens, cultivation and navigation is thus referred to as tātai irorangi. The whare wānanga was the most famous and elite of the old whare, where ancient lore, history and genealogies of the people were taught, as well as rites and incantations. This was a school of rangatira and tohunga. With a worldview predicated on the interrelatedness of all things, the Ontology of Whanaungatanga, it's not surprising that Māori structured their knowledge using whakapapa, genealogy. Whakapapa supplies the skeleton upon which other forms of mātauranga can be added to flesh out a coherent and pragmatic system of knowledge. Mātauranga Māori is not common knowledge in Aotearoa, New Zealand, nor are Māori pedagogies well known. Oftentimes, both are dismissed without fair appraisal. Justice Sir Joe Williams provides a simple framework of law in this country that has 3 components, epochs or eras. Kupe's law, the nation's first law of the tangata whenua from the 13th century through to 1840. Many credit Kupe with the discovery of Aotearoa. In Aotearoa's pre-European era, tikanga and kawa guided people's conduct and decisions. Cook's law, the nation's second law, after the signing of the Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, all the way through to 1985, and this was when the English legal traditions took seed in this nation. Aotearoa New Zealand's third law followed the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal when its jurisdiction was extended in 1985. Māori MP Matiu Rata wrote the Waitangi Tribunal Act to enable Māori to seek legal redress for treaty breaches. This represents the era of the clash or the coming together of 2 peoples and their respective legal traditions. Waitangi Tribunal reports are a valuable resource containing history, Mātauranga Māori, tikanga and the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. But the Waitangi Tribunal only has the mana to make recommendations to the Crown. What the Crown does with their recommendations is another matter. Williams describes pre-colonial Māori having stories, traditions and laws to regulate human behaviour, and those laws drove certain practices and principles. Whanaungatanga, the centrality of kinship and careful attention to relationships. Mana, principles of leadership and individual dignity. Tapu, behavioural control and the sacred-profane divide. Utu, reciprocal obligation, and kaitiakitanga, obligation to care for one's own. Protocols, procedures and guidelines that make sense of those practices we call tikanga. Tikanga is central to Māori law and governance. Tika means straight or correct, so tikanga, simply put, is the correct way of doing things. According to Hirini Mokomead, one may look at tikanga Māori from the point of view of ethics. Tikanga Māori is about whether an action is right or wrong, and whether it is morally appropriate or whether it is absolutely wrong. but in the case of tikanga Māori, judgments are made against a background of Māori values and knowledge. Tikanga Māori might be described as Māori philosophy in practice and as the practical face of Māori knowledge. Tikanga ensures that certain principles and values are upheld. It is useful to differentiate two types of tikanga: tikanga tere tere and tikanga iho matua. The former are basically customs that have been adopted and are not linked to Mātauranga Māori. For instance, whether people can leave their shoes on in a wharenui, a meeting house, during a pōwhiri, a formal welcome. That's tikanga tere tere. Tikanga iho matua is true tikanga and descends from the divine, from atua, God. It's the umbilicus between Māori philosophy and practical living, and it is based on Mātauranga Māori. The interrelatedness of all things, the ontology of Whanaungatanga, is central to Māori thinking, customs and culture. It differs from many Western philosophical ideas. People with different philosophies make different assumptions, thus increasing the likelihood of misunderstandings and offence.
And now you, the Maori people of New Zealand, must decide whether or not you wish to become subjects of Her Majesty Queen Victoria.
The tangata whenua of Aotearoa were organised into many independent sovereign nations, hapū. Iwi groupings became more important after the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. When Māori had common concerns, they would form larger confederations called runanga or whakamininga. An example of this was seen in He Whakapūtanga o ngā Rangatiratanga o New Tiriti, the Declaration of Independence of the United Tribes of New Zealand, in 1835. Traditional Māori and Pākehā had very different ideas about the whenua, land and property. The whenua is essential to Māori identity, economy and well-being. The alienation of Māori from the whenua is a source of conflict, grievance and great mamai, trauma. In order to understand what in pre-colonial Māori society might approximate Western notions of sovereignty and authority, one must understand mana, the role of rangatira and related concepts. These concepts are central to debates about sovereignty in Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. Utu, hau and kaitiakitanga are poorly understood, yet critical to understanding pre-colonial Māori ecology, economy, sociology and health, and they are in polar opposition to capitalism. Mātauranga Māori was collectively created, interpreted, critiqued, expressed, shared and retained. Māori routinely combined implicit and explicit knowledge, and they structured knowledge using whakapapa as the skeletal infrastructure that supported a coherent and pragmatic system of knowledge. Aotearoa's first law, Kupe's law, is based in tikanga. Tikanga is grounded in Mātauranga Māori, which is largely unknown by most people in this nation. Following the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, the nation developed its second law based on English legal traditions. Very little of pre-colonial Māori society, Mātauranga Māori or tikanga can be found in the nation's current legal, education, health or economic systems. Aotearoa New Zealand's third law followed the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal, a permanent commission of inquiry that hears claims regarding alleged breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi. Waitangi Tribunal reports are a valuable resource containing history, Mātauranga Māori, tikanga, and the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. However, they only have the mana to advise the government. What the government and courts do with these recommendations is another matter. Nō reira e te iwi, I raro I te koro ai aroha, ngā mihi.